Then we'll have dialogue following that, and we will transition regarding the number on the congregation leadership group from 2016 to 2020. And then a break, and we will receive the chapter statement draft for presentation and dialogue. And then the last breath of the formal session will be regarding discernment of nomination in particular. So it's a full day that requires our very best contemplative self, since these are matters of such import. I know Pat Shirley is in this room, is she not? There she is. Good. Here we go.
I'm in the room. Obviously, the PowerPoints that we so beautifully prepared in 3 languages are not. We're having some kind of a Wi-Fi hiccup. I see Spanish is up. Is that Spanish ones?
It just needs a minute or two.
Yeah, we'll wait till the hiccup is over. This has been my lot. Yes, thank you. I don't know, Spanish is able to cut through the Wi-Fi. Ah, okay. Mm-hmm. Go ahead. Should I go ahead? No.
You want to go ahead and have, I'll catch up.
It's a lot of verbiage. She said go ahead and she'll catch up. I'm sorry, you thought what? Oh, good, it's up. Great. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Buenas tardes. Boa tarde. And good afternoon. Let us just put ourselves in the presence of God and remember our chapter prayer. Most high, glorious God, enlighten the darkness of my heart. Give me true faith, certain hope, and perfect charity, sense and knowledge, that I may carry out your holy and true command. Amen. And every time I read this, a piece that jumps out at me is sense, and I want to add sense of humor. And we have had that here, I think, and it has carried us well as we work together. And certainly God has a sense of humor. He created each one of us as we are. Now, we have been on a journey since our last chapter in the area of governance and leadership. So the journey started in 2015 with the CPC asking us to think about what topics we wanted to bring up here at the chapter. And leadership and governance was one of those topics. One of the things that that we felt was necessary for us to really have a conversation about. And so the congregational leadership assumed the responsibility of developing consultation with the sisters. We did that through a survey, and we asked people to give us their insights. Each one of you was asked to give your insight into leadership on many different levels, so that we would have a sense of where the community was with this and be able to broaden that conversation, not only to each of the different assemblies, but hopefully in sending this survey out to the whole community, we would get a sense of the whole as well. So we would know what happened in our areas, but also what was happening what was the conversation throughout the entire congregation. And so we brought the results of those surveys to the assemblies. Now, included with the surveys was a little bit of a conversation that the leadership had together to talk about what was our lived experience. And so that was included with the surveys to kind of give you a little sense of, what was our thinking about this issue. And at the April and May assemblies, the dialogue centered on the aspects of leadership. First of all, the number on the team that would be beginning in 2020. Second of all, we talked a little bit about full and part-time, how that would work. Now, that's not something that is matter for the chapter vote. Only the number is a matter for chapter vote. But we did talk about it so that we could get a feeling of, again, how did the community feel about that issue? Also, living locale, living in different areas, living in Allegany. And then also, something that came out of the surveys that was not a part of our conversation, but was very strong in the surveys and then also became a part of the conversation at the assemblies was, how do we strengthen our local communities in clusters in order to make them a part of the leadership of the community and authoring life to the congregation? So, having heard and worked with the assemblies, having heard and worked with individual sisters or cluster groups or communities sending in responses to the surveys, we as a leadership are going to pass on to the new leadership the thoughts that have come out of those. And I hope you can read this, but what we are giving to them is the request that they develop a process for congregational study of the Constitution, Directory, and the Franciscan tradition to strengthen local communities and clusters as integral to the leadership of authoring life of the congregation. So this will be a part of the work of the next leadership. To reevaluate the purpose and structure and responsibilities of local communities, clusters, of local leadership and congregational leadership. To clarify the responsibilities that are essential to congregational leadership. What is the expectation? What is the responsibility of congregational leadership? And to see how they relate to this other restructuring of the clusters, the communities, the responsibilities of local leadership. To explore and develop a meaningful and sustainable way of serving as congregational liaisons. Now, you all know that in the previous 8 years, the leadership was asked to perform both functions. We flattened our leadership. We did not have any regional ministers. And so the congregational leadership wore two hats. One hat was that of a liaison with individual sisters or communities, and that of being congregational leadership with the responsibilities that carries in terms of resources, in terms of decisions of ministries, in terms of understanding and working with ourselves as a community with sisters in different countries. And the last thing that we have here is to review Book 4. Book 4 is a book that was developed by the Brazilian sisters, and in that Book 4 is how they govern themselves in Brazil with job descriptions and some of the guidelines that are used in order for their understanding of their responsibilities. And I think it could be used, or we think it could be used as a tool to inform us as this study is undergone. So, in summary, if I were to just speak sort of off script, but just to explain a little bit of our thinking. As long as we, being the congregational leadership, as long as the congregational leadership is wearing two hats, that's a tremendous amount of responsibility for people. With a restructure of the responsibilities, and many of the responsibilities that would fall under the hat of liaison being redistributed, then we feel it could be possible to do it with 4. But remember, that's a process. That's going to take time to happen. So I'm just planting seeds as you discuss this at your tables. So the next slide is a slide with these statements from our Constitution and Directory, just to call these to mind. First of all, the Congregational Council is composed of the associate minister and at least 2 other counselors. So the minimum that would be the congregational minister and 3 others, or 4. Presently, we have a congregational minister and 4 counselors, the associate minister and 3 others. That's what we have now, so that makes up the 5. And then just again, as part of our discussions, according to some circumstances, counselors may fulfill their duties on a part-time basis. And that would be a decision of the new leadership, whoever they may be. So if we go... I'm sorry. Okay. Questions? So this is a table that expresses the assembly responses to the question of 4 or 5. And you can see we're pretty evenly split on that when you look at the total. So if you look at each of the areas in which we have had conversations and assemblies, we collected table responses from all of you after conversation. And basically, and you can see there is differences in the different assembly places. Some people feel more strongly about one, others feel more strongly about the other. But when you look at the totals, they're pretty even. And so I think the conversation at the tables is going to be important as we go forward. So I now turn this over to Carmelita.
Thank you, Pat. Ellen, could we slip back to slide 5, please? So, sisters, this would be my language for this. The Chapter Planning Committee, through consult with all of you, with final determination after the assemblies of last October, November, and December, it was clear that governance and leadership was to come forward as a chapter agenda topic. It seemed to come forward in this context: living locale, half-time, full-time, and the number on the team. Your congregation leadership took on the responsibility to consult with you regarding your best thinking, and in that consult was a question that asked about how to strengthen local community and cluster to facilitate the life of the congregation. Out of the dialogues of this past April and the 1st of May, it became very clear that the matters of locale, living locale, and half-time, full-time, whatever, was at the province of the newly elected team. That the number on the team is indeed a decision of the chapter body. Now, the learning process through this consult the personal consult with you, and the assembly dialogues, which were of some length, began to bring some clarity to perhaps it's a moment to pause with our governance. Now, I was at all of those assemblies, and I would describe it as this. Overall, there is a sense of health in the congregation about your practice of governance. That is to say, your foundational principles of collegial governance, all having voice in appropriate ways, and subsidiarity, the delegation of authority, is in your bones. You've been at it since the Second Vatican Council, and you know how to do it. And governance is fluid, evolving, changing. And there's some wisdom that says, let's hold still and give this a little more reflection, particularly in clarity about authority as it is practiced at the local community level and the cluster level. Everyone with me? So out of those dialogues, your leadership body thought this is not so much a chapter act as it is a recommendation from a leadership body to a leadership body. And Ellen, if we could go back, please, to slide 5.
Which one is 5?
Just go back a few slides, please. I'll tell you when. That's it. So this is the wisdom that's on this page. This group, your leadership, congregational leadership group, has studied well those personal surveys. They listened well at assembly meetings. And it would seem that these are areas that it would be profitable to have some ongoing reflection about. So they want to steep it in Constitution and in a Franciscan tradition. Do some looking at purpose, structure, and responsibilities. Here we are, local communities, clusters, local leadership, CL. What about, okay, thank you. This is really a question about delegation, as well as the third, responsibilities essential to CL, and what can be delegated. The second and third arrow here are very similar. The fourth arises out of their own lived experience of serving the whole congregation and serving as liaison. And you have had different ways of doing that. There's no right or wrong. There are simply different ways of doing it. And that needs some ongoing reflection. And it seems particularly appropriate that a new team would have significant voice about how that is done. And then the last here is the book 4, which is pertinent to a particular geographical region. So it's important we have clarity here. This is a recommendation of your present congregational leadership team to the incoming or the newly elected congregational leadership team. So a conversation has begun, and it needs to be continued in the coming years. Are you all alive? Now I see a hand, Kathy, and you need a microphone. Don't even try, Kathy, till we get a microphone to you.
I just have a question for clarification. As I heard Pat speaking, I thought that last review book 4 wasn't specific to a particular region, to Brazil, but that we look at what Brazil has done and perhaps how that can inform the entire congregation.
And I'm going to ask Pat to speak to that, please.
Yes, that they have created the structures within which they govern, and to use that as a resource is basically what I was saying for us as this study occurs, because it's worthy of being a part of the whole.
So it can be resourceful in this study, in this ongoing reflection. Now, sisters, in planning this session with your leadership group, clearly it is important to bring this forward, since you were consulted, and it was part of the assembly agenda. So it has been brought forward. We also wondered if you just appreciate a little time to talk about this among yourselves. So we're going to do that for about the next 10, 12 minutes. And on your table ought to be a half sheet of paper, very bright yellow. And this is the question. Do you have any insight or wisdom to offer about the congregational leadership recommendations? So, in other words, they have done their best with this, but they want to bring it back to you for, is there any wisdom or insight that might be helpful to them? And then ultimately, that will be, after they have a chance to review any feedback from the chapter body, that will become the recommendation that goes forward to the new team. So how could we be all right if we said we'll take until 2:15 for some reflection at these tables? And again, you will need to use the PowerPoint screen in terms of looking specifically at recommendations. And I'll do a little heads up about the table response form. Thank you. Melissa, would you like a microphone? Okay, please.
Is the recommendation including the numbers?
No, the recommendation
Okay.
is a formal vote this afternoon.
Thank you.
That's where we're going to go at 2:15. Good, good. So now talk with one another, please.
The question is, do you have any insight or wisdom to offer about congregational leadership recommendations? Is that delegated or reset the limits of each person? But delegating the authority of determining the amounts to be
So when we said, well, maybe we could delegate, it's like a waste of time. So if Lucy wants them to come, Lucy tells me, when the group is this small, I can see it in a larger house. I can see it but for somebody who no matter what, there's another step that then the little person is like that. And her my husband, she is confidentially saying to the third person, Lucy just asked me to come. I have to make a phone call. Lucy just asked me to come. So it was like a waste. That's what we came to. I know it sounded good when we talked about trying to alleviate some of the liaison pressure. But for some of it, it didn't make sense. The liaison didn't come right straight through what Paul would say, yes, no, we're not supposed to present to you. But they'd be talking to Lisa. This is the one that knows the liaison is only two people, this is individual grade, and then back, two steps. It's like a race.
So when we say,
us and it goes to you.
I was thinking like more the way to alleviate some of the pressure.
That's what we would do. We would alleviate in large group some of the pressure on your liaisons because they're all together. But to us, give us what makes sense for us. That's how we do it.
Okay, this is my version of what I thought you said. Okay. Again, they're asking for our insight or wisdom part of recommendations. So this is basically about the second one. About the third one. Responsibility of censor. Delegated, because the next one talks about we'll get a third, clarify the responsibilities of the section to the CEO. Right? Yeah, about number 3. Okay, so number 3, what I have is what can be delegated. Is it money or cost? Delegate an example. No. One has the money. One has the money. No, I'm not giving examples of what people said. Money. Money. And money or cost per delegate. That's what I'm trying to say. Can what you're talking about is spend money for needs. Somebody else. Can certain expenses be delegated? Or limits? See, what we're talking here about, because right now, if it was at to a certain limit, that could have been just about we want to buy a car at the house, it's going to cost us a certain time. Car repair, and limits of expenditures. These delegates, termination. I don't know, you know what I'm saying? It's like, that's one of the things that liaison does. It's saying, you think what you're examples can assist you with that, and you're not going to do something else.
Even if we get it down to something small, John decides that she needs to go home to family for a month. That's going to be so how far does that go without saying she that's what it goes in. That one comes down to well,
well, maybe in what can be delegated, for example, request for expenditures. Can that be delegated to someone who's localized to make those decisions? You're saying that is even this whole small. All right. That what we're trying to say? And permission for expenditures, for large expenditures, large, when I'm talking about language. Get permission for large expenditures to be delegated. I think that's what we were saying, right? Or did you get that? Second. Okay. And then, does the size of the
But then this recommendation that your suggestion has is explore and develop meaningful and sustainable way of serving as leadership. Now, well, I guess that would be 4 or 3. That would take care of that. Doesn't have, that doesn't depend on us. Right.
We also
And so, if you have any insights or wisdom, please place those on the table response form. So, sisters, you are asked if your table group has any insight or wisdom to offer the congregation leadership team regarding these recommendations on the screen. Please place those on your table response form. It's okay. Sisters, there is a request for more time. We're going to have this session for the sake of a quality time to address the number on the team. We'll draw this session to closure by 2:20.
like, no, I have it like, in your room, you're supposed to have, over my door. But it's just over my door. No, this is like an area where, you can take it. So it can be found by guys. But I heard stuff like guys, it's up there, right? No. Yeah, now. Can the regional minister come into your room? Take that down, make copies of it. Not even give you an explanation. It's the form of privacy. Well, none of them do it. We call it so Pat reads the liaison. Do they have the right to do that? If that's their personal will, I would say it's the person. I would think it's a certain thing of ethics in there. The thing is, it's in your copy on file here. Liaison responsibilities if they bring it. Pero me puede leer. Those were given out at some point also like assembly or sent out.
Does any table circle need a few minutes? All right.
Right. I'm writing it down like
I call you now into this large circle and ask that you bring the table response form to the recording secretary's table when we break at 3 p.m. Now, I just saw my first big yawn of the afternoon. It was a great big hearty yawn. So I'm going to suggest 1 minute here of just standing at your place and just let yourself move a bit.
Yeah, give me
Put
that.
it away. Super.
There you go.
Thanks. And then you sit down. Thanks, sisters, for all of the good energy. Now, we are transitioning to the number on the team for 2016-2020. Your particular Constitution statement reads in directory, the Congregational Council is composed of the associate minister and at least 2 other counselors. Now, when we speak of a 5-member team, we are speaking of a congregation leader, associate minister, 3 counselors. When we speak of a 4-member team, we are speaking of a congregation leader, associate minister, and 2 counselors. This first rose up before the first survey was sent out by your leadership group, in which you were asked about your best thinking regarding the number on the future team. This was a major dialogue at the assemblies in late 2015. And as noted earlier, the outcome of this is that regarding a 5-member team, 88 of you support, and regarding a 4-member team, 74 of you support. Now, in a conversation with your congregation leadership team, I know the chapter planning committee went into assembly hoping for a fine consensus on the question. And instead, as I said to your leadership team, you sliced the baby in half. This 88 to 74 is significant difference. So here is our best thinking about how to proceed. We do think we need a dialogue here in the chapter, but one that is rather brief, because this has been dialogued at length. But we believe a wisdom dwells in the whole that is gathered in chapter. What we think might truly get us to what is the movement of the Spirit is some sustained, silent reflection in which each of you can enter your own mind intuition, heart, and come to some clarity about the number on the team for 2016-2020. So I want to lift up a certain caution, and I hope I do not offend. But I know, and I know this dialogue is not about convincing one another or dragging one over to 4 or dragging one over to 5. We are way beyond that moment. We need to come with individual integrity to this question. What does the congregational good ask of us? Now, I want to give a heads up on this. The caution I give you is we often have very strong feelings about this number reality. And it can often reside in us as resistance or certitude or a certain cynicism. And it's a bit of a hard rock. It can be a hard rock in us, where we are absolutely certain that it needs to be 5 or it needs to be 4. Or we're resistant to even considering perhaps it ought to be 4 or 5. It can sound something like this. Oh, for God's sake, we only need 4. 200 have died. Fewer and fewer are out in ministry. We're all gathering in Allegany. Why in God's earth do we need 5 people? Can you hear the certitude? Can you hear even perhaps resistance? Not that those aren't considerate, But on the other end of this, it can look like, well, for God's sake, it's inconceivable we think of less than 5. It's been this way since 1859. What a foolish nonsense. Can you hear it? So, we think you need a little dialogue time, a little listening to the wisdom and insight in one another. And more than that, I think you each need just some quiet time when you can touch your own soul and your own wisdom and smarts about this, and then cast your ballot. Does that rest all right with you? Yes, please. And we need a microphone. Here, sister, do you want to use this, please? Okay.
Just have to grab it.
Hello, excuse me. I just need to say this, and we've already, as a community, made this decision, and made it with all of the advice that you just gave, and now we're asking to rethink it, because, it's very obvious. So I'll go into this, but I feel not violated, but as though what I did before really didn't count. And now we're coming to chapter and we're being asked to repeat what we've already done. And there are more people that have entered into this than we are. So that's, for me, that's probably going to be much more real than just our opinion at this point. And I personally don't think anything has changed before today to make that different, other than we're sitting together, and for some reason, the total of 88
isn't acceptable.
Thank you, Sister. I wonder if anyone on the leadership team would want to speak why this is before the body today. Why this is that 88 and 74 via assemblies seem to need consideration at chapter. Could someone speak to that?
Does anybody else on the leadership?
And others on the team are certainly welcome to speak to it.
So I'll speak to it from where I stand. I think probably the team as a whole feels this way. But, if it were more clear, I think that then we would, if it were an outstanding majority, then we'd feel more comfortable. And it seems to be an issue that resurfaces quite a bit, and we just felt it would be appropriate to bring it here and to, put it to bed one way or the other. And the other question, I guess, is, I know you said that we've discussed all of these issues before, but to make them a little bit clearer to the whole. Part of the conversation at the tables, I think, are good because all of you come from different experiences in different assemblies. And these decisions were made in our assemblies in our own world, which may be very different from Florida and New Jersey and Brazil and Jamaica. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. And I'm only staying with the leadership team at this point.
Yeah, I would just go along and affirm what Pat is saying, that it was our feeling in order to be inclusive or listen to the chapter body, that it would come for consideration and discussion here. And we spent a lot of time in the past few weeks working with Pat and prepping ourselves for this presentation. In a way, my sense, and I'm glad you stood and spoke up, because it's a different way of looking at it, that yes, as a greater body, we have been at this. And perhaps there needs to be that affirmation to say, are people clear with what was decided through the assembly process?
That was not clear in the voting process.
That it would come here.
Oh, sisters, by virtue of your constitution and directory, this is not assembly decision. This is a chapter decision.
But the chapter does give us the flexibility of how many to have on.
Correct.
And I think that's the clarity we were looking for. At this time,
Exactly.
yes.
And the assembly tally is not the vote of the chapter.
Correct.
This is reserved to your chapter body. So, sisters, I'm going to, does Pat or Margaret Mary or Odette, any other comment?
Yes, Odette.
Please, Odette.
Sorry.
I was going to say that. I think at the assemblies, we took a leaning because this is really a chapter vote. And we thought it would be helpful to have a brief discussion at a chapter, just a brief discussion, and then the vote. So this is really formal.
Pat, please.
Commonly to use the phrase, we didn't want to slice the baby in half. I think we, at assembly, as Odette and everyone has said, the leaning was, that this was a leaning. But we wanted to give everybody an opportunity. If there was somebody that was concerned, was resistant, wanted more, wanted less, you could speak to everybody, and we'll take a vote on it. But if we know what we want, then the voting's going to be easy. We're just going to go on. But it's not that we respected every assembly and every person and every contribution.
So, are we ready then? Do you want to speak? Yes, please.
I want to speak that I don't have to speak, because everything was said.
Good. Thank you. So sisters, again, thank you for the question. I mean, governance is multi-layered. So consults occurred at assemblies, leanings were taken. It's very clear, and now we're in chapter, that there is real difference about this. Yes, please.
Is Charlotte allowed to speak to the issue? She's a supporting member and would like to speak to the issue.
Okay, the question was, I know what the question was. Anyway, at our assembly, we decided that we thought that the general leadership would know what to do because they have to live it. We are not living it. Those sisters who've had to live it, like Mary Agito and Avro Chinfat, they've been through it. And Margaret Mary, all these people have been through it. So we said, well, we think that they are going to have to make the decision. How can we make a decision if we've never lived it? I have not been on the general leadership. So how do I know what they need?
Thank you, sister. And the response from your leadership team to that was, in that first survey, here's our best thinking about 4 and about 5. And here's maybe what we might have to do that. They gave their best thinking, but this is reserved power to your general chapter vote. The constitutions and your directory are very wise to invest this decision in a chapter body. Now, we'll take this question. Yes.
I'm not sure that this is a question of numbers, but when we made a decision, a choice in New Jersey, we felt one way. Obviously, Brazil felt another way. I would like to know why Brazil felt the way they did, and I think people need to know why we felt the way we did. We're not segmented. We're one congregation, and we've got to be able to listen to each other on this issue.
Correct. So could that be the invitation into a little table dialogue here? Into each of these circles, since we're a wonderful mix of regions at these tables. So, sisters, the question before you is really, you're going to very soon be voting for your 2016-2020 leadership group. And I want to move to this slide, which I think you can see all right. When you consider this question of the number on the team, you need to be in the consciousness of the whole responsibility of elected leadership. And that is to steward the charism and mission of the congregation, to faithfully steward, engage, continue unfolding the understanding of Franciscan charism and mission in these times. It is about relationship, a both and, both within the congregation and without. Within the congregation is with you individually, local communities, assemblies, committees, the many ways you have of being in relationship, and without various collaborations, the local church. And another responsibility is that of the overall administration, the overall organization of the congregation, fulfilling its legal and fiduciary responsibilities. So, this is an important slide in terms of the consciousness now of what responsibilities rest with the elected body. I think I need to say this. Your present team could not definitively say, we recommend 5 or we recommend 4. You will recall in their comments to you in the survey that there would have to be some adjustments in the practice of how you do this for 4 to work well, even for 5 to work well. So now the dialogue. I'm going to call for a moment of silence, and then you need to help me with this. This is not about convincing. It's about listening deeply, watching the movement in your own soul. Do you think we could have a 15-minute table dialogue and then move to silence and the vote? Could we live with that? I'd like to ask that before we move into it, and I see hands going up. Kathy, and then over here, please.
Well, I think our reality has changed. We now have a healthcare coordinator. We did before. But let's think about this. If we have a 4-member team, many congregations have a healthcare coordinator as part of their leadership team. We could perhaps do this as well. Have the healthcare coordinator on the leadership team as the 5th member.
Thank you, Kathy. Yes, please.
Yes, regarding Pat's suggestion, we have no one at our table from Brazil and no one from Jamaica. So we, especially with the Brazil, who had a really strong leaning the other way from the, I'm trying to look at Jamaica, and Jamaica, no, they supported 5, yeah.
So, sisters, just here, strategically here, is there someone from Brazil who's fluent in English who could also join that table? Odette, are you? Is there someone here, please, before we go to anything else, who could join that circle?
And Jamaica, we have.
And Jamaica, if possible. Someone from Jamaica, if there are 2 people from Jamaica at one table. Gwen, thank you. And is there someone from Brazil who is fluent in English? Who could go to that circle? All right, sisters, we're going to have to, Odette?
Odette?
What is that, please?
I would like to recommend an open discussion.
I was going to suggest that too, because we don't have, there's many tables that don't have somebody from each of the different countries.
All right.
So I'd like to see it.
Is there some energy for an open forum here? All right, thank you. And can I still, we could open forum for 2 hours here. So let's get an agreement. Can we do that until 3 o'clock? And then we move to the vote regarding the number on the team. All right. So please, let's have a couple people, Annie up, others the microphones. Will you just raise your hand? Why don't we agree we will not be clapping or shouting or stomping our feet? Let's just listen. Let's listen to the wisdom. And I'm being told to limit the time. Obviously, clarity and brevity are appreciated. Would you please raise your hand if you would like a microphone brought to you? Here we go, please, Joan. Joan, please.
I think one of the underlying issues is, and that's what we discussed in the first session, is the whole concept of local authority. Since we had our new constitution, we have had a less structured approach, particularly here in the U.S., that may not be as true in Brazil and Jamaica. And I think until we solve how much authority is there at a local level, we don't know if we need more people or less people. I'm sorry, I'm going too fast, excuse me. And so it would seem to me that we might want to stay with where we are and spend the next couple of years trying to take care of the issue of the local authority, because that will influence the number.
Thank you. Please raise your hand. Marlene?
I would like to ask somebody from Brazil to explain for me why you felt so strongly that we should retain the current numerical structure of the leadership team. No hidden agenda there. I just would like to know.
Marty, may I dovetail on something? My question to Brazil, when you voted for the councilors, were you thinking perhaps more of Brazil? You wanted to have 5 councilors in Brazil?
Okay, Pat, I'm going to hold that, please. Is there a sister from Brazil who could respond to Marlene's question? It's very strong for 5. Could someone help us, please? Thank you.
Bom, eu posso começar aqui, depois outras irmãs podem completar. Eu acho que não é a primeira vez em capítulo que nós estamos discutindo sobre essa questão de número. E a reflexão nossa, brasileira...
Meg,
ela...
Here. It's easier for you to have your...
Pode começar de novo.
Só repetindo, né? Então, que não é a primeira vez que a gente está discutindo essa questão de número.
It's not the first time that we're discussing this question of numbers.
E a reflexão do Brasil sempre foi nesse sentido de um número maior.
The sense in Brazil was always for a larger number.
E às vezes nem é no sentido só do fazer.
And it's not only about what people are going to do.
Mas é mais no sentido de ter mais participação e mais cabeças pensando, refletindo.
But it has to do with having more heads thinking, reflecting about what needs to be done.
Uma pessoa a mais ou a menos, ela pode fazer uma grande diferença na dimensão da reflexão.
One person more or less can make a big difference with regard to the dimension of reflection.
Muito mais do que o serviço em si, o fazer em si.
It's much more important than who's going to divide up the work and what the service is going to be.
Um grupo muito pequeno, ele pode reduzir muito, limitar a visão.
A small group can limit vision.
Então, assim, eu acho que está mais, a nossa reflexão de brasileiros, mais nesse sentido, do ampliar e não do reduzir.
So for us, in the context of Brazil, this was our vision, to keep the group larger rather than smaller for this purpose of having more heads involved in the decisions and the vision.
Tem a irmã Guelmar está ali, né, reforçando que essa também é uma experiência nossa na região, inclusive de 5 membros na liderança regional, e isso amplia mais e dá até uma certa confiabilidade maior à própria liderança, próprio serviço desenvolvido na região.
And so it's important to understand that this has also been our experience of Brazil. As we moved to 5 people, it really enlarged our capacity to think and reflect in ways that contributed to our life together, to the regional life together.
Não sei se mais alguém das irmãs brasileiras poderia completar, né?
Gracias. And Margaret, please.
If I may just speak to Kathy Euler's comment before about the healthcare coordinator. Just so that there's clarity, this healthcare coordinator position at this current time, Gladys Sharkey has served. And basically it's a role on her presence on boards with Baycare and the hospitals. Has nothing to do with healthcare coordinator for our sisters, which is how some communities define that role. So it's not to do with personal care or communal care, it's on the board level and the system level. If we were to shift that that might be a consideration. But at this time, that's not where we're at. So just so that there's clarity on how that role functions. Okay? Thank you.
Please. Nancy, and then here, please.
I agree with what has been said already, especially by Brazil. I would like to add to that, that in the circles that I sat in, and we talked about this number in our leaning for 5, was that we said, you know, the job is a big responsibility, and there's lots of work to do there. And, you know, our leadership is aging just like the rest of us, and needs to have that as much help as they can, to give them the strength and the energy to continue their ministry each day to us.
Thank you. And please, sister here.
I would like to see 5, but my reason is because I would like Brazilians to be on our general council. And I think it would take time for adjustment if we had a Brazilian or 2, you know, for them and for us as a congregation.
Thank you. Please. Please, Liz.
Thank you. I would say we are one congregation. And because of that, we are in 4 countries. It would be most helpful to help with the one congregation idea. If we did have 5, we are geographically apart from one another. To keep the cultural continuity on the governing, in the governing body is so important, to bring that to the sisters. So for the reasons we have Bolivia, Brazil, Jamaica, and the U.S., I would think that 5 can be more helpful in keeping us one congregation.
Thank you. Gwen, please.
I am also thinking that because the United States and Jamaica, to some extent, do not have regional ministers. In Jamaica, we have an administrator and a sister who is responsible for the house, you know, the sister's spiritual life and so forth. And, you know, I believe that if we were to decide on 5, we would have more sisters to go around to meet the needs of the sisters, the congregational needs.
And Annie.
I love the idea of having sisters from other cultures and countries on our leadership team. I don't like the fact that right now we're using our leadership team as liaisons for the individual sisters, and therefore I think that we really do need to look at the role of that. I'm sorry. We do have to look at the role that they're playing in the lives of our sisters in the United States, because we don't have anyone else to go to if we need braces. We don't have anyone. Right now, you can't spend $500 in dental without going to your liaison. So they are serving as the person to go to for small or large needs.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
We do that, because we do that.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. So that if we have a sister from another culture there who isn't adept at the language at this point, it would make that very difficult. Although I do love having people from sisters from other countries in our leadership, overall leadership.
Thank you. Others, please, just raise your hand.
Part of what I'm hearing is that there is kind of a movement toward the new leadership coming up with sort of a new model of empowering sisters on the local level. That's something that I think I'm hearing. However, such a new model is not in place. There's no plan yet for that. So for me, to reduce the number of members on that leadership team to 4 would not allow time to develop a new model.
Thank you. Is anyone else wanting to speak?
I agree with what Jean just said. And I also hear, the argument of Brazil of having 5 heads is better than 4. I agree with that too, for the whole congregation. But to me, there could be a compromise. Have fewer people in leadership is ideal, as we know. So if you bear with me, if we went to 4 now, even knowing what Jean just said, and the 5th, bear with me, the healthcare coordinator, who is system-wide, she has the point of view that should be on the council, not the personal. That's what we're saying. We do not want the personal work, that particular, on the general council, okay? So the healthcare coordinator has a system view, like ideally the other 4 would have as well, okay? And be freed up from the hand-holding. That's what we want. So that healthcare person will be out there doing healthcare things, and the other 4 would then, this is where the compromise comes in. You have a 4-member, actually, a group actually working out, how can we do this without hand-holding so much? See what I'm saying? You still have the 5 people for the heads, 5 heads, and it's all system level. And you're going to force it. You will force the other 4 to deal more with the system level, the congregational level.
And thank you. This would be the last opportunity to speak. Please, Goya.
Meg, pode traduzir? Desculpa, vou falar em português mesmo. Where's the microphone? Microphone. Eu estou pedindo desculpa de falar em português porque é mais fácil para mim.
I ask your forgiveness for speaking in Portuguese, but right now it's easier for me.
O que eu quero falar não tem nada a ver com número.
What I'd like to say really doesn't have anything to do with numbers.
Isso é alguma coisa que eu sinto já há algum tempo.
It's just something that I've been feeling for a long time.
Muitas vezes a gente ouve as irmãs norte-americanas dizerem, por que não tem uma irmã brasileira no governo?
Very often we hear sisters from the U.S. saying, well, why don't we have a Brazilian sister on the government?
Mas no atual sistema de governo aqui nos Estados Unidos, das irmãs aqui, acho que não cabe uma pessoa ou do Brasil ou da Jamaica.
But when we think about the system of leadership and governance here, I'm not sure a sister from Brazil or Jamaica actually fits in.
Porque nós não falamos inglês.
Because sometimes we don't, from Brazil, we don't speak English.
E nem conhecemos a cultura.
And we don't really know the culture.
E eu fico pensando, como uma irmã norte-americana, no sistema que está aqui, né? A irmã, como a Cindy falou, tudo que precisa tem que ir no governo. E tem sempre uma irmã que é responsável a irmã pela região, não sei muito bem.
And so as Cindy was saying, we can understand how is someone from the leadership group going to respond to this? These individual requests that come from sisters.
Eu não sei se continua o mesmo esquema do governo que era antes.
I don't know if this is going to continue the way the structure has been before, the way of proceeding has been before.
Então, a minha ideia é, se quer alguém de outro país no governo, que tem que mudar a estrutura
So if we're really seen as a value, having people from other cultures be on the general government, then maybe we also have to think about modifying the structure.
And sisters, with that comment, I want to thank you for the idea of bringing this into a large circle. It certainly is complex. I'm going to ask you now in these next 5 minutes, in light of your own knowledge and experience of the congregation, your understanding of congregational leadership and its responsibilities, and what you have heard in a number of conversations, including this dialogue. Will you please become very quiet, and for the sake of the congregational good, come to clarity? Ought there be 5 on the congregation leadership group, or 4 on the congregation leadership group for the coming 4 years? Sister Joan Dawson will call for the ballot in 5 minutes. And so, are you ready for the ballot? And Sister Joan, please.
Well, my friends, the nitty-gritty has gotten grittier. The first question I would have for you is if you are ready for us to proceed with the votation on whether or not we will retain the 5-person congregational team or a 4-person congregational team. Are you ready for that votation? We are going to be voting by using the card, and it has been suggested that we will simply use the green card voting for 5 or 4. I would ask the tellers to please stand near their tables so that you can vote. I would remind you that the vote will have to be an absolute majority, which is 1 more than 1/2, which would be 49. I would like to begin by asking for a votation on the number 5 on the congregational team, because that is the present number. So I ask you, if you are in favor of retaining a 5-member congregational team, please so signify by raising a green card. Have the tellers all counted their particular tables? Would you please come forward so we could get the number?
Did somebody count mine? Because I wasn't in the table.
Aí conta da gente também.
You counted it.
21.
13.
Então 15, 15, não é 14, 15.
This is 50.
21. Vinte e 21.
I believe we can dispense with a second vote, as this particular vote was 82 affirmative votes. So thank you. The grittiness disappeared.
Now, we have all earned our break. How about 3:40? That's 25 minutes out from now. We have Chapter Act draft to consider, and we need to get ourselves prepared for tomorrow for the discernment of nomination. So 22, That's a 25-minute break, and watch for the bell, please. And also the table response form for the congregation leadership, if you simply place it at the recording secretary. Thank you so much.
I'll send a couple of people on the lookout.
Sheila. Marlene. I'm over here waiting for Melissa, so I cannot.
I'll tell the Laura.
I'm sorry, Carmelita, I got up and for coffee.
And I meant to ask. And we might get some greater specificity. Melissa, there's certain disabled, especially our sister who's a haters and men suggestion. And that always and given here, Kiki, I'm sorry. Will be given over to the appropriate, to the leadership group, appropriate committee. Everyone is, it's not just that. Every team has a responsibility. I've seen that many have very specific tasks, and those will necessarily be sent to the right address.
I just said that, but I couldn't do that.
No, but that needs to be contemplated. And what that says to you is just how highly things I'll do this thing on Wednesday in the conceptual. This will help you write the original, so that'll give you a sense. There's one other thing about this. You need to find out context why this does not have great specificity. And not necessarily the examples from this. Just, this does not have specific, but we will use this at every level of this competition to inform our sessions, the leadership team. Which of the marvelous things this is a mistake. This isn't about doing it. So this is and then I think it might be good Joe's to hear what he said. And she probably needs to be out there this and she's doing it Portuguese. But what she can do is yeah, I'm going to right.
So that's why I wasn't going to do it.
So locking on whether or not we have
That was one of the goals, but it's hard to come up. Okay, I'll go.
And I have a copy.
I have a copy on my table.
If you don't, I'll give you this.
Okay.
How are you?
I'm good. You're amazing.
Well, that got a little weird. But it's interesting, isn't it, basic information about what was the decision. And you also, what's being asked, done at a chapter. To start thinking about how we can make your elected governments more inclusive. I agree with that. Yes. And I mean, I've been in Jamaica, myself 3 times now. I can't imagine coming into this culture and living full time and have a real sense of this culture. Jamaica's very different. And how they exercise authority is very different. It's much more like a local superior, whatever you call it. You know? So there's all that culture. Yes. Sister, could I ask you to do something? I have to stay put here because of Melissa and Joe. This morning in that break, we went to the far left by the sink. I have red. Right? Red. Thank you. Will you ever share a present?
Oh, that's why I brought back down.
Aren't you good? Here, I just want one.
I would never just
These are
bring
yummy.
one down.
Are these
and
from
eat it.
Costco?
They're in a big,
I think they might be Costco.
big, tin.
They're very good.
You like them? You sure? Yeah?
Thanks so much for this. So, I think we're good. I'm up to almost.
Okay.
And Ozzy Mary is going to do the Portuguese translation. And Joe will get up.
I told her how to do it.
So, sister, I think on that windowsill to the far left, it's a tall red one. It says Delta Sky now. It's American Express. It's got a screw on top and it goes away free. Could you just go and look and see if it's there? I can't look. It says Delta Sky. It's red and about this high. Nobody else will have it. I'm going to stay here and behave. How are you? I'm not supposed to leave here.
Why?
Melissa's coming over here with Joe. And you can spend so much time looking at it. Oh, I'm thrilled to have it. Thank you, sister. If he
keeps water very cold for long times.
And you said, well, does he always have an orange? I think he's right.
I think the group's doing wonderfully, don't you think? I think the group's doing wonderfully. And people are respectful when there are differences. Good. Yes. Sister, I go home Tuesday night. And I Wednesday to get my office thing in, to get my office in order. And a little family thing I said I would be responsible for. And that night at 7, we open our own and we're starting on Wednesday night with a celebration. Oh no, whatever. Engaged. So we're going to be able to think of it. The first day is memorial, the second day is property future decisions in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So the time is terrible. We can't do this for 4 days. Or 10 days and that. Go home and just collapse for well, in the room, well, they have everyone live stream, but in the room, I think we have a lot of but we all look very much alike. That's what it looks like. Here you have a little more. Well, Lucy and Sears with the NGO and the United Nations. We have 2 sisters in Baltimore protesting civil disobedience that went out of jail. Art of Platy and Gil Gilbert. They live in Phil Barrigan House, Jonah House. We have 2 in Washington, D.C. More and more in Michigan. We have about 50 Our sisters went out there to stagecoach in 1920 and worked in public schools because they could not get late to work in Buffaloes among the Native American authorities. So the sisters who taught these public schools amazing stories. We were well, here in the United States in New York, and then off of New York, there were 16 congregations around the country. So they went from 1852 and got out to Grand Rapids in about 1886, a little earlier, 82. So Adrian, Dominicans, and I will come off the same province of St. Joseph. And all this traces back to who this about today. Who was talking about that? Nova Alliance, where he was showing pictures of these different. Are you there now? At Barry? So you know do you know Linda Becker? You must know lots of these. You know the men? Yeah, they're fine people, aren't they? There's a bunch of Jerry Austin. Did you not know? No, but he came up to St. Paul for a little bit with this guy in St. Louis. And he was to reside in the region of his home. I stayed down at Washington Square. The chair was in New York, right across, yeah. So, sister, do you know where Margaret McGee is? One table over. Please at her place today. It's a pink sweater on that chair. Sister, Rosemary. Last one's a name of sister. Brazil. Who saved
Wow.
You're going to find out. And if it do we need to wait? No, I just wanted to because it's on the list because and then at some point, I was talking about okay. Have you heard that bell I'm gonna get going here. email the translation to Ellen, who gave everything to Margaret. Margaret's right up there. They should. Margaret McGee was going to say that there would be one action.
And Portuguese on the screen, the statement but not the question.
Okay, so is there a written copy? We'll have to
It'll be on the screen over there. Okay. It's just the questions are not there. Right. We think we just got it. And then we all have that. Both languages are on the screens.
Margaret. Have Meg get on board. Because he's looking on the PowerPoint. Well, sisters, associates, and our brothers as well, we are now going to entertain the chapter statement draft, something of the grace and the wisdom that has flowed from all of you. Before we get serious about this, we need Josie Mary and Joe and Melissa to step forward here a little bit. And may we have a boisterous applause for the work. We are so grateful for the lunch hours and the evening hours to craft this draft statement that they will now present. I think Josie Mary's going to do the Portuguese translation. Melissa, you're set to put it up here, and Joe is here to do anything that's needed. So let's have the statement. Melissa will set the context. So I'm going to give us just a moment to get centered here. Just quietly, and then Melissa, if you'd take it, please.
De vez em quando,
We expect a rousing hand of applause after it's been done, too. Every table paper that was done, we got in 2 languages, and we read them. There were marvelous, concrete concepts and ideas in them. And they will go to new leadership for use among us. They will not be lost. They were incredibly valuable. However, the statement is one that reflects the heart and soul of what we saw in those papers, what we heard in conversation, and what we believe was the hope of this group. We hope that this will be used to inform decision-making on every level.
whether it's this exactly or, whatever we need to do to it. But it be a form that leads every one of us, personally, communally, in our clusters, whatever they're going to be called, and on the leadership level. That it's something we wake up with in the morning, set our day with, and when we finish with our evening, we look at it and celebrate our successes and acknowledge where we still need to grow. And it says in English, led by the fire of the Spirit and our Allegany Franciscan Clarion Charism, we lovingly gaze on the source of all goodness and consider our mission and witness in the church and the world. Impelled by the life and ministry of Jesus, we contemplate all of earth's clamor for peace and justice. With hearts of fire for inner conversion, we act as gospel women together with others to generate a culture of peace reflecting the love of God for our human family and common home.
Nós sabemos que algumas palavras em inglês, nem sempre literalmente conseguimos traduzi-la para o português, né?
We know that there are some words in English that cannot be translated exactly into Portuguese.
Guiadas pelo fogo do Espírito e nosso carisma francisclariano de Allegany, amorosamente olhamos a fonte de toda a bondade e consideramos nossa missão e testemunho na igreja e no mundo. Impulsionadas pela vida e ministério de Jesus, nós contemplamos os clamores de toda a criação pela justiça e paz. Com coração abrasados pela conversão interior, agimos como mulheres do Evangelho e, juntas com outros, buscamos gerar uma cultura de paz, reflexo do amor de Deus para a nossa família humana e a casa comum.
Guiadas por el fuego del Espíritu y por nuestro carisma Francisco Clara, miramos con gozo en la fuente de todo bien y consideramos nuestra misión y nuestro testimonio en la Iglesia y en el mundo. Empujadas por la vida y el ministerio de Jesús, contemplamos el clamor de la creación por la paz y la justicia. Con los corazones ardiendo por una conversión interior, actuamos como mujeres del Evangelio que juntas con otros buscamos generar la cultura de paz reflejando el amor de Dios por nuestra familia humana y la casa común.
So again, we are deeply grateful for the work of the three of you. Thank you so much. It is an enormous labor when one agrees to serve on a writing committee, because you are first fully engaged participant and then. Now, sisters, here's a secret. No one is better at wordsmithing than women religious. So here's a clarion call to control any urge you have to wordsmith. We all have our favorite words. What we do ask is for conceptual change, ideas about content. And unless a word is significantly related to the conceptual, to the content, we suggest that we just let it rest quietly. So guard against the wordsmithing. I'm going to suggest a couple points of order here. We're going to have some quiet time with this statement, so you can let the statement touch your spirit, your sense of hope and desire of this chapter. Are there any of these forms now on the tables? One chapter statement form. On that statement form is this question, and this is to encourage these three as they go back to work. Overall, our table supports the chapter statement draft. Yes or no? Overall. And you could indicate 4, 2, whatever. The second is, overall, our table supports the chapter statement draft with the following suggestion. But we want them to be encouraged to know if this is resting well, and then do the work that they need to do. Everyone clear? We're hoping, given the rapidity with which this is being turned around, that these PowerPoint screens serve you well. Move about in a way that you can see them clearly. And then there is the table response form on each table. So let's just have some quiet time, and then we'll have a small table dialogue, and then we will collect these table response forms. So I'm going to suggest maybe 5, 6, 7 minutes of quiet reflection on the statement. invite you to the table dialogue now. Again, listen deeply. Please be certain that all have opportunity to speak. Again, caution on wordsmithing. I'm going to suggest the next 15 minutes. 4:15, I will check in with you and ask that the table response forms be ready. Thank you.
It's used by Franciscans in the States now. It's not something we still standing. You let it go. Probably understand the What did you say? Everybody okay? Overall, I think supports the chapter draft, the holiday suggestions. Making any suggestions? No. Like just as it is. It's fine. Makes you think I'm recycling. Oh, I think it's sad. Practice tonight at 6:30, you know, most of practice is I got what time you said. A quarter after, I
No, not right now. Minute. Is there any table circle that needs a few minutes to complete the form? Thank you. Is any table group needing? Okay, folks, I do need to call this. If you need another minute or two, hopefully we have that when we conclude the afternoon session. Now listen, you seem a bit light and frivolous, which is a lovely sound. That could be tired, yes. Jose Mary, come. So we're going to move.
Nós queremos chamar a irmã Edi, Maria da Paz, T e Oneida para aqui na frente fazer uns exercícios conosco, para que a gente possa ficar de pé e animar, descansar um pouco. Edi, Maria da Paz, T, Oneida.
So up we go on our feet, please. let's get going here. If we break a hip, we're in trouble. Now, sisters and associates and brothers, that resource paper on the chapter direction statement from each table needs to go to the recording secretary table. And tonight, these three good women will work with that statement, and it will be brought back to you tomorrow with its editing and development for your review and, please God, affirmation. So just one more time, could we recognize the labor? And encourage with prayer this evening. Now we're going to have a transition and begin to center our thoughts. And in some ways, sisters, we formally enter now into the discernment of nomination, particularly with a bit of sense of overview of election. I'm very aware as we do this work that this what's coming now, the discernment of nomination, is wonderful motivation to have good rest this evening. And as important as the rest is, I think, is the solitude. That we all have time to make this transition to the question of whom is God calling forth in the midst of you. And we all know that solitude and rest does help that ability to attend. So, throughout this chapter and all of its preparation, we have a dog with us. Now, particularly to our fully engaged participants and to all in this room, the work beginning this evening in solitude and prayer and tomorrow is the discernment of nomination, followed by election on Monday. Another moment here of our hearts burning within us. We have framed this in the language, this pursuit to know God's will, in the language of Jessica Power. We are keeping the vigil of mystery earthless and still. We lean to catch the stirring of the Spirit, strange as the winds will. And our process of discernment regarding nomination and election, can you see all right? Nomination and election is what Claire ultimately calls the disposition to imitate or to vote, is to have open mind, open heart, open will. This work of gazing this evening and tomorrow and Monday is to gaze with a long, loving look on the reality of both desire and abundance and suffering and scarcity in the congregation, church, world, earth. The women we call forth are not in isolation of movements in the congregation, church, world, earth. So to gaze with a long, loving look upon this congregation that you love. The work of consider is the work of careful reflection, particularly on the attributes needed to fulfill the responsibilities entrusted to the elected. And that is to consider attributes related capacities, developed capacities related to charism and mission, relationship, and organizational structural realities. To contemplate is to dwell, seeking to know God's will. Ultimately, the contemplation must give way to what Claire calls spiritual freedom. The freedom to seek the congregational good. Now, we within the last hour have talked about this threefold movement. None of these threefold realities are in isolation of the other. Relationship, charism, mission, organization, structure. And we did so well at the assemblies of just 2 months ago, 3 months ago, in which you examined these charisms of attributes related to charism and mission. For many of you who brought your discernment of nomination and election booklet, these are found on page 12. So I want to invite your minds and hearts just to rest on these words. These are the gifts and attributes needed to unfold Franciscan charism in these times. Another movement is that of relationship. And again, this is relationship within the congregation and without. Let your eyes gaze. and the attributes associated with organizational and structural competency. This is the long, loving look regarding the reality of our structures in these times. And at assemblies, we spoke about some of these very human, personal capacities. Having sufficient health, good health, the spiritual, emotional, and physical care of self, a bit of bounce, a little humor, computer literacy, and it ain't enough, the openness to learn new technologies to be effective today in leadership, new language skills, and belief in God and falling asleep. Not in chapter. But you got it. It's what most of you are doing every day, I suspect. So now, this discernment, these cultures that we develop around our nomination and elections, I like to hold in two hands. One is around our tendencies toward the heightened personal, and the other is towards the congregational good. We are all vulnerable to the heightened personal by dint of our human nature. We aspire, but we are very prone to gossip, to overspeak, to undermine. You know your favorite pathway. We all have some. So this is the guarding, particularly in these chapter days, against our personal biases, this rigidity in the way we think and perceive others, attempting to influence simply from liking and disliking, nominating and electing from a stance of empathy or fear of those we do not know well, politicking, secretive activities, whispering, holding the meeting outside the room, advocating aggressively, and any other creative behaviors. There are a few, I'm sure. And then this desire for the congregational good, to beg God to give you this kind of freedom, for personal, communal freedom, to remain in this posture of discernment. May none of you have certitude about who the five ought to be. Please, God. Trustworthiness, speaking truth with responsibility. What you pray in our chapter prayer, perfect charity, sense, and knowledge. We'll hold the chapter session at the chapter session. We hope to build your knowledge base through these days and use of attribute-based nomination, informing your choices, and caring for the common good. So what this begins to look like, sisters, tomorrow, Sunday, is we begin our day with a lovely celebration of Eucharist, and it is the celebration included is the 50th Bolivian anniversary. So it is a special day, particularly for you as congregation. At And by the way, that Eucharist is 8:30. Yeah, half hour in bed. And at 10 o'clock, we will assemble in this room. We will first receive the revised chapter statement. And we must achieve approval on that statement so that that can inform the discernment of you who are nominating and the women who will be nominated. We will continue that process and close our morning with a celebration of the Bolivian anniversary. The question to be preoccupied with in the morning hours is what attributes are most needed at this time for service as congregation leader, associate minister, counselor. That's the key question for tomorrow morning's discernment. And I am confident that all of you, since we first formally considered this discernment pathway at assemblies, that you have been doing your self-reflection about your own developed attributes and gifts and competencies, as well as where do you see those gifts residing in others. All of that becomes woven into the process of nomination tomorrow afternoon. That session is a closed session at 1:30, and it will be held in the chapel. I am told you did this wonderfully 4 years ago, and we hope to just slip right in on that very prayerful, contemplative presence and the naming of those you wish to call forth. We'll go into a little more detail at the actual time tomorrow. So that by the end of that afternoon, we have identified, named the women that you wish to call forth. Tomorrow evening, that group of sisters will meet with me at, I think we're going for 6 o'clock to make the evening a little easier. And they have a brief evening and overnight in which to pray and discern about going forward in the process of election or withdrawing. On Monday morning, we will begin our day, again a closed session, in the chapel, and each of these nominees will speak to their sense of call, going forward and why, or withdrawing and why. We will have a pause, hopefully a break of some length for solitude and prayer, and we will begin the elections at 11 o'clock tomorrow Monday morning. The anticipation is to elect the congregation leader in the morning, our noon meal, and then the election of the other 4 in the afternoon. I think that's more than enough. So, this feels like one of those scriptural moments of good and faithful servant. We have been good and faithful. And now we beg God for this grace to enter fully into what awaits us. I'm going to ask if we could just be in silence for a few moments while Sister Mary Jean comes up and connects with me for a moment.
Sisters and associates, partners in ministry, I want to thank very, very sincerely our presenters from this morning. They really, really opened the topic so beautifully. And I think the results of what we came up with as a result of their work really was facilitated by their presence and their work among us. So thank you so much to all of you who brought us Mother Earth. A few announcements. A reminder that there's a music practice today at 6 p.m. in the chapel. And we ask all people to come and join in the singing, especially, if possible, anyone whose language can be comfortable in Spanish. Tomorrow's the big Spanish day. Also, tomorrow, please bring your discernment, nomination, and election booklet to the Sunday session, which begins at 10 a.m. We begin on Sunday morning at Mass at 8:30 as a reminder, not 8. Eucharist with the celebrations and with our sisters from Bolivia will be a great, great celebration. So we look forward to that. There is an announcement on the bulletin board in the back that Kathy Euler gave us regarding the Green Revolution. If you'll look at the exhibit at the Quick Center on campus, if you have an opportunity, the information is listed on the bulletin board in the back. And if you haven't seen the Quick Center at the university, it's a great opportunity to do so. And if you have the time before you leave, the drivers, I'm sure, who have been absolutely wonderful. Thanks so much for all of our sister drivers. We get to and fro. Thank you for them. And lastly, blow out your candles. See you at 6 o'clock. Have a good evening.
And I ask that the chapter planning committee come forward, please.
For tomorrow morning, the fully engaged and consulting will be at the round tables down here, at the same table you were at today. Fully engaged and consulting.
Amanhã, gente, as participantes plenas vão reunir aqui nas mesas amanhã de manhã.
And breakfast here in the Mother House is at 7.
Nas mesmas mesas, e café de manhã aqui na Casa Mãe é 7 horas. Is the breakfast? Para as pessoas morando simplesmente aqui na Casa Mãe estes dias, café de manhã às 7 horas. O resto de vocês no apartamentos, vocês vão comer café de manhã no seu apartamento, não aqui na casa-mãe.